Chapter 7. Shadows of afternoon cooled the April day. From piggyback on Gideon's shoulders, Pascal could see that Mr. Freeman and Nellie were waiting for them. A covered bridge like a long barn loomed ahead. The wood was patched and red paint peeled from the sides. However, when a carriage creaked out of the bridge, Pascal knew it must be safe. He slid from Gideon's shoulders. A horse and rider followed the carriage, and the rider waved a newspaper at them. "The president's been shot, boys," he called. "Bad news for you Negroes." A woman dressed in Sunday clothes leaned out of the carriage window. "What you say, sir?" "President Lincoln's been shot." Clutching his stick, Pascal walked close to the carriage and listened to the rider tell the lady the news. Gideon, Nellie, and Mr. Freeman stood by the entrance to the covered bridge. "Yes, ma'am," the man said. "President Abraham Lincoln was shot in the back of his head at Ford's Theater in Washington. They don't expect him to live." He shook the newspaper. "Hot off the wires and only 2 days old." "When, sir?" she asked. "Shot April 14th. Good Friday, ma'am." "Well," she said, pulling her head back into the carriage, "it serves him right. He couldn't just go around freeing people's property." The man tipped his derby to her, folded his paper. Pascal ran over to tell the others. His voice trembled, and he swallowed hard. He wanted to ask, "What about our 40 acres?" But he didn't want to worry Nellie. "What happens now?" Gideon asked. The man overheard him. "Vice President Andrew Jackson takes over as president, boys," he said as he rode away. "President Lincoln ain't gonna die," Gideon said, stomping his boot. "I knew a soldier shot in the neck who lived," Mr. Freeman said softly. The man said, "In the back of his head." "That'd be a heap more serious." Pascal took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. President Lincoln wanted to give them land. If President Lincoln died, what would happen to their family farm, their future? Nellie stared at them sadly. "We should pray for our president," she said. "Ease his way into glory, if that be the Lord's will." The men removed their hats, and they all stood in the circle. With heads bowed, Pascal closed his eyes and prayed, not so much for the wounded president, but for them. A late afternoon breeze whistled sadly like a funeral flute. 3 leaves rustled. As they entered the dark, covered bridge, Gideon asked the question Pascal had been thinking. "You reckon if President Lincoln dies, they'll still give me my 40 acres? Pascal felt that squeezing fist in his gut. Maybe getting the family farm was impossible now. They'd soon find out. Poor Gideon, poor Pascal and Nellie. He decided to make his brother feel good. "Sure," he said loudly. "President Lincoln's vice president must be a Republican, too. Seems like the Republicans, the Union League people, and General Sherman were all for giving us 40 acres and maybe a mule." With a sigh, Gideon strode ahead of them. The covered bridge had occasional windows on each side, but in spite of the windows, the inside was dark and gloomy. Pascal didn't like to be closed up. He felt as if he could hardly catch his breath. He held Nellie's hand until they walked out. They were in Georgia now. Sunshine at the end of the covered bridge was welcome. After he limped out Lincoln, he glanced around quickly and thought of something. Good Friday, Saturday, Sunday. "Walls of Jericho," he said. "Y'all know what today be?" Mr. Freeman raised his eyebrow. "Easter Sunday. Today be Easter Sunday, and we be in River Stop, Georgia," said Pascal, pointing to a sign. "Well, glory be," said Mr. Freeman. "I heard my daughter had a child that was sold to work in River Stop. Guess I be going to look for her in the morning." "Yaw," Gideon said. "I be scouting for a campsite." "Come back soon," Pascal called. It seemed as if Gideon was always leaving them. He turned to Nellie. "Know why Saturday and Sunday be strong days?" "Strong?" she asked. "'Cause Monday through Friday be weekdays." Nellie snickered, and whispered the town's names. "You know anybody from Riverstop?" Pascal asked her. "Riverstop been calling my name all my born days." Her honey-brown eyes sparkled. "All these freedom-ringing places, they be calling me." Twirling her skirt, she smiled. Pascal frowned. "How you know they be calling you?" "It be a special mystery thing. You saying you always knew you'd be here?" "I'm here, ain't I?" Mr. Freeman strode over to talk to some men sitting by the bridge. Pascal stretched out in his back in the warm, sunny grass. What a day this had been! They were in Georgia now, and soon they might have the land. He felt something crawling on his cheek, something crawling on his arm. Her back turned. Nellie sat chewing on a blade of grass. Pascal was suspicious. Laying on his side, he stretched an arm out and squinted his eyes. He saw the blade of grass dance in his arm. Grunting, he pretended to be asleep. When he thought she was off guard, he jumped up and yelled, "Gotcha!" Nellie jerked her arm back and laughed. "You look like you be asleep. You tickled me." He started to chase her, and she ran circles around him. Finally, he sat and rubbed his lame leg. What kind of freedom was having a lame leg and letting a girl outrun you? How he wished for 2 good legs and arms. As they sat, he told Nellie about Gideon falling through the bridge and Gideon talking back to the man on the horseback. "You be brave," she said, hugging her knees. Pascal sat straighter in the glow of Nellie's admiration. Gideon had called him a crooked leg. It made him feel like a nobody. But if they could have a family farm, he would be somebody. Gideon said so. As if she knew what he was thinking, Nellie said, "I be worried about your brother. If they don't give him his here land, what's going to happen to him?" "What's going to happen to you and me?" Pascal wondered. As evening shadows crept along the riverbank, Gideon returned. He led them to a rocky ledge and a piney wood hillside. Under the ledge, an opening lay into a shallow limestone cave. Pascal had always dreamed of hiding in a cave, and this cave was perfect. Fragrant, scented pine trees above and below them on the hillside were covered with long needle puffs of green. The bare ground was ankle deep in brown pine needles. No one could tell if they were in a cave. That night, Pascal slept well, sheltered from the wind and dew. Awaking early, he squatted in the cave entrance where he could look over the pine forest, clear down to the Savannah River. Open spaces always made him feel good. After a breakfast of water and 1 small chunk of bread each, Gideon announced he would go into town to ask about Freedman's bureau. As Mr. Freedman put on his straw hat, "I be looking around town myself. Some gentleman told me where my granddaughter just might be." Nellie winked at Pascal. After the grown-ups were gone, she asked, "Can you fish?" "If I can dig some worms, we're going to have a real supper when they come back." She pulled the pot out of her sack. Pascal knelt on rocks where sunlight playfully kissed his face from time to time. He had dug worms and fish swam up to snap at them. He used his potato sack to net the fish. In 2 hours of patient waiting and fast snatching, he caught 5 nice-sized silvery fish. "There," he said, "I thought I could do that." He felt like a man handing over fish for Nellie to cook. Nellie cleaned the fish and seasoned them with chopped wild onion. "I be keeping them cool in my pot," she said, setting the pot in cold water between the rocks. That afternoon, Pascal saw Mr. Freedman come back with a tall girl who was carrying a bundle. "Pascal and Nellie," said Mr. Freedman, "this here be my granddaughter Gladness, who wants to join us. She remembered me from when she was a child. I just called her name, and she packed up and left for freedom." Gladness held out her hand. "How do you?" Pascal nodded and shook hands. He hadn't expected her to be pretty as a daisy flower. Gladness smiles, white teeth and a dark brown face, was like a bright sun streak from dark skies. Gladness helped Nellie boil the fish, and they feasted. As they ate, Gladness rubbed her arms, took deep breaths, and glanced toward the sky, smiling as if she could hardly believe she was free. She seemed thankful to be with him. It made Pascal remember how he felt when Gideon had come for him and Nellie. In spite of the troubles they were having finding their farm, these were glory days, exciting jubilee times, if only Mama had lived. That evening, Gideon didn't come back. All night, Pascal worried about him. Had his brother gotten himself into trouble again? Should he have gone with Gideon?